And good afternoon. I'm Russell Rivera, founder and president of Voice Wealth Management. Welcome back to Discuss with Russ for June 24th, 2020. This is episode 12. And my guests this afternoon are Shaun of Douglas Elliman Real Estate and Warren Goldberg of Mortgage Wealth Advisors. This is, again, episode 12, as I said, and our topic this afternoon is update on real estate as New York emerges. For those of you tuning in today for the first time, the Discuss with Russ series has been focused on helping you get through the crisis and start thinking and planning for what the world might look like as the crisis dissipates. Now that we can leave our homes and see each other face to face again, we want to help you anticipate possible responses in society's behavior so you can be most prepared to succeed. My firm, Voice Wealth Management, primarily works with entrepreneurs, young professionals, and their families to help them get the most out of their money. Well, I'm a chartered financial analyst and certified financial planner. Many also see me as their personal CFO and financial therapist, as I recognize the psychological power of money in addition to using short-term and long-term planning to help you get the most out of every dollar you earn and use. Now on to our guests, Shaun and Warren Goldberg. Shaun of Douglas Elliman Real Estate brings New York City real estate savvy served up with a side of Midwestern charm to the table as he assists buyers, sellers, and investors with selling or finding the perfect residence to suit their needs. During his tenure with Elliman, he has established an impressive track record with buyers and sellers in various stages of life, from first-time purchasers to executives in the luxury market. He loves to travel all over the world with his wife and 2 children, holds a private pilot's license, and loves boating at their lake house. Shaun also played college baseball during his freshman year at Western Michigan and still plays golf, football, baseball, and basketball. He is also involved with his community as he is a board member of Young Life Greater New York and is an active member at his new local church and is joining us from our mobile unit out in Northern Indiana. Warren Goldberg is the president of Mortgage Wealth Advisors, Inc., a certified mortgage planning specialist and a published author. His interviews and presentations include Blog Talk Radio, Newsday, The Daily News, The Long Island Herald, and even the Nassau County Bar Association. His mortgage industry newsletter is published bi-weekly and is read by thousands of subscribers. Since 1992, he has been sharing his industry knowledge and financing strategies, including how to properly use your mortgage as a financial tool. He's helped thousands of clients own their homes, refinance their mortgages, restructure their debts, and invest in real estate. As for housekeeping issues, there is a Q&A tab for asking questions, so please use that button to ask questions of our panelists. We'll get to them as they're appropriate during the course of our conversation. And as always, this web show, as much as it's on Zoom and in webinar, is also being broadcast on Facebook Live and is also being recorded. And we'll tell you how to get a copy of that recording or how to access it later at the end of the program. And with that, Shaun and Warren, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Great. Right. Thank you so much for having us, Russ.
Of course. So back in March, the real estate, before all this started, the real estate market had come off a hot January and February and would have been heading into a usually strong season of the year. Obviously, with everything that's gone on with COVID, that hasn't happened. The financial crisis and the associated recession has clearly changed a lot in the last several weeks. But now New York City has entered phase 2, Long Island and New Jersey have allowed showings again. What are the large changes that people should expect to see going forward as people start thinking about transacting in real estate? Shaun, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you very much. So I see things changing significantly as we move forward here. I do believe that the idea of virtually vetting and checking out a property, vetting the buyer, in terms of us as agents and even the sellers. Everybody wants to know a little bit more about the property well before they actually go and physically view it, now that we are even allowed to go do that, just because it's still risky, of contracting the virus. Even though the numbers are down, it's still out there. And there's a lot of people that are, are worried about getting it and bringing it back to their families. So I think we're going to see a significant amount of upfront virtual tours, walkthrough tours, FaceTime tours, vetting of the building, vetting financials, vetting of the purchaser's financials, I think, our first showings are going to be more along the lines in terms of a seriousness of a second or a third showing, because the buyers are going to know so much about the property. We're going to know so much about the buyer. Therefore, each in-person showing is going to be really, a pretty serious potential purchaser. So that's probably the biggest change, I think, is more, heavy lifting is going to be done up front.
So it's going to be a change in the process, you think?
Exactly. I think it's going to be a complete shift in the change, at least for now. While things are still, out there and COVID is still prevalent, I think that people are still going to want to, change their way about doing things, for the time being.
And Warren, what large changes do you think people should expect to see going forward?
I believe that what I've seen, even from earlier this year, is there's been a tremendous amount of buyer demand to own a home. We were seeing a tremendous amount of buyers that were just waiting for the spring market to arrive. There's still not enough inventory out there, and with some of the rules and regulations that Andrew Cuomo put in place that is hampering realtors from taking listings, it's only going to exacerbate the problem. So we're going to see a lot more bidding wars on starter homes, young couples that are very eager to move out of the city, out to Long Island. We've been seeing it before, and we'll be seeing it again.
And so, Shaun, Warren mentioned some of those hampering factors put in place by Governor Cuomo. Do you have any more color on what those are and how they'll affect the process?
Well, in terms of, because I really work primarily in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens, we don't do too much outside the city, which some of the counties upstate have been working through these for the last, I would say, almost month for now. But we have, a specific set of protocols that we're required to follow in order to just show the property. Of course, we all have to wear our PPE. We have to sanitize on the way in, sanitize on the way out. Not more than one person in a property at a time. Even if it's a husband, wife, the husband has to stay down while I would go show the wife the property. So it's just going to be a little bit more painstakingly timey to get things done and to do a typical property showing. So I think that's going to slow the process down a bit, but as mentioned, I think that each showing is going to be a little bit more of an escalated showing, if that makes any sense.
So yeah, Warren, that I guess goes to your point. You're, at least from the buyer perspective, if somebody's going to be showing a place, they're going to be that much more motivated if they're actually coming to see it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've even been seeing something which I've never seen before in the New York area. For the last few months, we've had buyers that have been going into contract without even setting foot in the house. So it's, when you're motivated to buy a home, you're going to figure out a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, back in April, I spoke with Mike Barilla, who is another real estate agent focused on Manhattan. And his thought was that this crisis wouldn't dissuade people from wanting to move into and live in New York City. But articles that, have been pasted multiple times across the Times, New York Times and elsewhere, give the current impression that the current bias is to leave rather than to come. Yet separately, I've had my own clients who are looking to try to take advantage of people living to get big deals on, like, maybe they have adult kids and want to downsize it and move into the city. Given what we've seen over the last several weeks, what are your thoughts, at least in terms of the action you've seen? What are your thoughts on how people feel about living in the city versus the suburbs versus maybe somewhere not in the New York area? Warren, why don't we start with you on that? Sorry.
A lot of it depends on, personal taste. There are those people who love to live in the city, the hustle and bustle. They've always wanted to live in the city. They'll probably always want to live in the city. On the other hand, I've never wanted to live in Manhattan. Even more so now, I would never want to live in Manhattan. But, I like having a front lawn and, a 2-car garage that I can utilize for parking. It just depends on personal preference. What I do believe is that many people who work in Manhattan, who originally were thinking about moving or living closer to work, are now realizing that they can work remotely and not necessarily have to live close to work. I've had a couple of clients in that situation who have been buying upstate. Their businesses are in Manhattan, and they're realizing, hey, I don't have to live close by. They're buying properties upstate. They're getting a better quality of life, lower costs. So, to each his own, really.
Sean?
Yeah, I completely second that, Warren. I think you kind of hit it on the head. It's going to be specific tastes, on a case-by-case basis, for each family and what they feel is best. New York, there's no place like it on earth. It's its own animal. It's got something for everybody, and it's always going to be a coveted place to live, even with a pandemic, because the pandemic will pass. This too will pass, as the old saying goes. We'll come back, bigger, better, badder, stronger. And, something you touched on, Russ, that there are opportunities out there right now. And the people that take advantage during times like this are the ones that make out like bandits in the end. So, I absolutely believe that there are people that do not want to be in the city. They don't want to be anywhere near it. I think we're going to see a somewhat of a paradigm shift in terms of people working remotely and or at least 1 or 2 days of work a week from home, to where maybe they don't mind commuting those other couple of days. But, I think we could absolutely see a fair amount of people heading outside the city. And for my colleagues that work up in Westchester and Connecticut, those markets have been scorching hot the last 6 weeks, in particular. So, it's odd if you're looking, when I have clients looking to do this, they own up in Connecticut, they're looking to buy in Manhattan. And if anything, this made it somehow a perfect time for them. A great time to sell in Connecticut and a great time to buy in Manhattan. It's very odd. I don't know if this will ever happen again, but I am certainly encouraging them to, strongly consider that. So, but there's a lot of things to consider, when living in Manhattan and living outside Manhattan. So.
Yeah, and I think it does make sense, right? We're kind of all of this, hey, we're emerging now, but then you see what's going on in other states where things are climbing again and more starting to think about locking down again. And I think that might mess with people's calculus a little bit. How do you think some of those things might play into this? Because, how long do we think it's going to be until this really works itself out with how people are going to think about this and make final decisions on where to be?
Yeah,
I know,
a tipping point.
question.
Yeah. If anything, it's going to be kind of a tipping point, for those people, whether they're considering outside or inside the city, or even just sitting put and waiting to see how things play out before they make a major decision like moving. I just, none of us know. I'm sure the officials and the government know more than we do, and the general public. But at some point, I think there's just going to have to be strict guidelines and even laws put in place about how we move about throughout the city and in our everyday lives, even outside the city, to get this thing hitting the head so it stops spreading somehow. And I don't have an answer for that, for sure.
Yeah, and I realize that was a bit of an unfair question.
No, it's okay.
I'm
answer it
asking
all.
you, how long are we going to be in this? And that was a terrible question for the two of you in the topic, but it's
all
more
good.
like, right, these things, you have this type of disruption, and especially in a real estate market that can be a slow mover because transactions take a long time. So just a question of, how long are really the ripple effects of this going to be felt, in terms of reaching a kind of new equilibrium? That's really the question, right? You have a shock to the system. How long does the real estate market take to play out to that shock? You guys might know that more than me. That's really the better way to ask that question.
Gotcha.
Well, considering what happened in 2008, it did take a couple of years to recover. But also that crisis was longer lasting than this crisis. This was kind of an immediate shock, and then we're trying to recover. So I don't believe it's going to take years. It might take a year, but we'll have to see. There are other factors that are also affecting the markets as well. For example, the fact that homeowners cannot deduct more than $750,000 of mortgage interest, that they're capped on their real estate tax deductions. So a lot of that has already been playing out on the higher end of the market, at least on Long Island. Those multi-million-dollar houses have been very depressed in their sales.
So yeah, you brought that up, and that kind of leads to the next question. What other factors may play into pricing and financing purchases, right? Warren, you and I have talked about now as a result of the crisis changing how the mortgage market has essentially inverted. How is that playing into that process?
We have seen a significant number of changes since all this started in March. And the irony is that a lot of the damage to the mortgage industry has not been due to COVID directly. There have been early buyback issues. There have been a lot of issues in the secondary market that has had effects. Two of the big COVID issues that we've been seeing is that banks are being much more conservative in underwriting. They are verifying employment right up to the closing table and beyond. Many lenders, in fact, I would even venture to say most lenders have cut back significantly or totally on the jumbo market. It's much more difficult to get jumbo pricing than it was in January.
And Shaun, knowing that you're on the higher end of the market, not only obviously just in Manhattan, but if you happen to work outside of it, because I know we've talked about some outside of New York properties you've helped in marketing and selling, you know, and I know we're just getting going again, you know, have you heard about this, and how are you expecting it to affect your, you know, more luxury clients?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of Manhattan, you know, a good chunk of my clients, at least 50, 60% of them are cash. So it doesn't affect them too much in terms of mortgages, of course. But it could, you know, potentially affect them if they're trying to sell their property as well, if their buyers are trying to take a mortgage. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to, you know, have an adverse effect on the market, possibly prices. You know, until things kind of get back up and running, till, you know, everybody's jobless claims stop and we can get unemployment numbers back to normal and at all-time lows where they were before the pandemic hit. I mean, can you believe how amazing the economy was and the unemployment rates were, and you know, all without an insane inflation before the pandemic? I mean, it was amazing, and I think we can get back to that. It's just, you know, when, you know, and in an election year, of course. These things always happen in election years. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but come on. Let's be real. Something's going on.
Well, there's obviously a lot of uncertainty coming now, you know, for the rest of the year, in terms of getting back open, in terms of the election, in terms of figuring out, you know, more information about how the virus treats us and how it's changing. You know, obviously all those things are at play, and it's very hard for any of us, given our, you know, areas of expertise, to kind of make calls on what's going to happen. Just, you know, talk about the trends that we're seeing. So I get that.
Yeah.
So Warren, obviously you talked about how the you know, jumbo financing is very much dried up. Shaun has said there are going to be more cash deals. You know, obviously you, as a mortgage broker, you don't necessarily see cash deals, but do you think there are more cash deals? Do you think there have been more cash deals, maybe even, or that's kind of the wave of the future, in combination with perhaps lower prices on the higher end?
There is a lot of money in the New York metro area. And there are a lot of people who are buying all cash, whether they are foreign nationals, whether they are retirees that are downsizing, whether they are first-time home buyers coming from affluent families with large gifts. I'm seeing it all. The one thing, though, I do point out to people, realtors and buyers alike, who are contemplating a purchase with all cash, you have to realize that acquisition debt, meaning the debt that is used to acquire a property, is what is tax deductible. If you buy a house all cash and then sometime later on you wish to pull money out for investments or anything else for that matter, it is not going to be tax deductible. So what I recommend to people, I recommend even to the realtors, the best thing a realtor has is a cash buyer. I mean, it's, fast closing. You don't want to upset the apple cart, so to speak. But the IRS has something called the 90-day rule, which allows cash buyers to get a mortgage subsequent to the closing, all cash. Within the first 90 days, they can apply, and that mortgage is considered delayed financing and it is tax deductible. So for those buyers who might think, let me buy all cash, but I may need some, money later on, or I don't want to keep it all tied up in the house. I recommend contemplating that, but you got to do it very quickly because after the 90 days are over, the window closes.
Fair enough. Shaun, is that something you've seen or something you've dealt with? Shaun, do we have you?
I think I shocked him.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't see too many people doing that part. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We still have you. Go ahead.
You got me? Okay, cool. Sorry about that. The
That's
old
all right.
Midwestern here, right in the smack middle of Indiana, doesn't have the best service right there. I would say it's not a common thing that I see, but Warren, I think that's a great idea. Especially for the sake of getting the deal done, and then pulling some money back out of it and saving it for a rainy day, and especially if there's a renovation, but you want to make your offer stand out in front of somebody else's. That could be a good way to get it done. So
Absolutely. And the fact that money is so inexpensive now. I mean, just to give you an idea, conventional financing, very clean transaction purchase, good loan to value, great credit scores. 30-year rates are hovering around 3%, many times even less. Especially if you're a young couple, close all cash, pull the money out, give it to the financial advisor, call Russ.
If only I were allowed to take that money. I'm really not, believe it or not.
But it's so much easier to arbitrage now than it has been at other times.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, right? But there are so many different things that are involved, right? It's like you've got mortgages and you've got deductibility, but you also have the SALT cap, Warren, that kind of takes away some of that benefit as well, in theory. So, there are a lot of different things to kind of put together and think about when you're making that decision.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's why I tell all of my buyers, do not look to buy a mortgage in a bubble. Don't just go out there and think you can shop rates or closing costs, because at the end of the day, they're all about the same. It's so important to coordinate this strategy with your financial advisor, with your CPA, because if everyone is on the same page, then that mortgage is truly going to work for you rather than you working to pay it off.
Very good. So we've been talking about kind of people moving in and out. Again, according to the Times, some New York City private schools are opening Hamptons outposts for children whose families won't want to return to the city in September. I actually just spoke to someone this morning who lives in East Hampton, and she works with the school district out there. She says they've had 110 new, registrations for school for the fall for people who aren't going to come back to the city, whether they were publicly or privately educated. We talked about remote work and business reopening policies. How long or how much do you expect that to have an impact on where people are living and, when they might come back, or even on a rental market in a faraway place, because people are going to continue to do that. Shaun, I'll ask that to you. Yeah.
I think as long as there's opportunities to maintain a safe distance from, the epicenter of the outbreak in the United States, I think people will stay where they're safe. Everybody's safety is paramount and number one in minds. So I do believe that that will continue to keep people away, which will, in theory, keep transactions from happening. Although
big cliffhanger.
Big Midwestern gremlin.
Yeah, big cliffhanger on the although.
I get used to being out somewhere else, their new place in life, their new home in life, and therefore gone again.
Well, I got you after although. That's where we lost you.
Oh, great. That was my it was
And then we lost you again. We'll come back. We'll come back to Shaun.
Thousands
I think I've
of
ever
viewers
said
on Facebook. They're all on the edge of their seats waiting for Shaun.
And now it's gone.
All right, so Shaun, we'll come back to you on that. I know it sounded like you were about to say something real big. We'll come back to you on that. Although,
Again.
I know Warren, you're also licensed in Florida and we've talked a lot about the Florida market as well, and New York just as a general, New York State as a general population center has been losing population, at least in comparison to places like California. Maybe not California so much, but certainly Texas, North Carolina, Florida. Some of that has to do with people retiring. Some of that has to do with other reasons as well. So how much do you consider this, how likely do you see this to continue, and what are the impacts that you think you're going to see in your business on helping people get mortgages locally in order to make that happen?
I think you'll see more of an exodus as people retire, and they have on the what's the word I'm looking for? They foresee the future of New York State taxes increasing. I think there'll be more incentive to move to other states where there is no state tax, like Florida. We are seeing younger couples who are relocating again, both for quality of life issues as well as other opportunities. So I think that exodus will continue, I'm sure, to the chagrin of Governor Cuomo.
So yeah, Shaun, do we have you back?
I'm here. I got you guys loud and clear here.
Great. So you were saying although, then we lost you again. You came back, you said although again, and we lost you again. So let's come back to that question. We were talking about, we were really talking about, the shifts in business and reopening and out east and rental,
Yeah.
and you were going to share something. Go ahead.
I will start with although again, just so it stays clear. No, it's amazing. I was about to say the most profound thing I've ever said in my life, and then it cut off. It's sad. Now I can't remember it. What I do believe is that if there are opportunities for people to live a new normal life elsewhere, and they feel safe and at home there, I do believe that we could see people moving to other parts of the area or different states permanently. And that then opens up transactions happening when they, to sell their property, obviously in the city, but that's probably a trend that I see, other than, the opportunistic investors and buyers looking to snag something. Those are the two types of transactions I think we're going to see.
And so you think that's a longer term trend that, Warren thinks it's a longer term trend that's going to continue. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, I could absolutely see that, especially with the taxes. I think that's been going on for a little while. And as long as the guys up in Albany continue to do everything they can to tax every single person that wants to own anything in Manhattan, I don't see why a lot of people are begging to live there, paying those high taxes. But there are a lot of people that just own because they want to own a piece of the greatest city on earth too. So they don't care about the taxes. They'll just pay because it's a drop in the bucket for them. So, it's just, everybody is a kind of a case by case type of thing.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Yeah. So, we've gone through, we think about some of the longer term trends. What are the other longer term trends you think might exist in the real estate market locally, more nationally? We've talked about, obviously, in New York City proper and New York City area, a surge of foreign money, but that partially because of the pandemic, partially because of government action, might be stemmed a little bit. Is that another headwind for real estate prices locally, or do you think that's a temporary thing that will go away and encourage more foreign money into the city? into the area. Shaun, start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that foreign money has certainly dropped off over the last couple of years anyways. This certainly isn't going to help that, but that's already been a bit of a trend. The foreign money kind of drying up, especially from the Chinese when they have their repatriating rules of keeping their money stateside there. So we've seen a significant drop off in the Chinese investment, but we still get a lot of Canadians. We still get a fair amount from the EU. So there's people that are always going to want to live in Manhattan, always going to want to live in the city. But yeah, I definitely think that that's absolutely a trend that will continue because it's already been going.
Warren?
I've seen a number of buyers panicking because of the pandemic. Some of them were in contract and were desperate to try to get out because they felt that real estate prices were going to plummet. Others were just sitting on the sidelines, saying, "Hey, everything the real estate prices are going to plummet." I'm trying to remember. There was a quote from one of the early presidents. I'm trying to remember who it was. I want to say Theodore Roosevelt, but I could be wrong. He said something to the effect of, "Buy real estate; they stop making it." And at the end of the day, I don't see real estate prices plummeting. I see the lower end prices remaining very strong. I don't think they'll be adversely affected at all by the pandemic. I see, at least for the New York area. I do see the higher end prices, 10 million, 5 million, 2 million. I see them continuing to be a bit soft. That started probably about 2 years ago, and those values have been coming down a bit. But it is what it is. It's not, people are not going to be getting these steals buying $3 million houses for, 700,000. The values will level out, and then they'll probably start to rise again.
And so a question from one of our watchers, viewers, however it might be, simply had a question about the SALT tax. We did touch on it a little bit, or the $10,000 cap on state and local deductions. Do any of you know anything about whether or not that's going to get, knocked out because of COVID, which would again encourage more people to invest more in their real estate, at least on a dollar basis?
I've heard rumors. I would tend to doubt that there'll be anything permanent on that front. It's possible that there might be like a temporary incentive through some future stimulus that for the next year or two it could be deductible, but then it'll sunset out.
Shaun, have you heard anything? I know it's not your primary thought.
No, it's not. But that worries me that it's even on the table because that's already a hot topic with a lot of people. I would say overall in general, Manhattanites are very lucky compared to some of the outer lying areas where the taxes are just absurd. So, people in the city are actually pretty lucky in terms of their tax bills. But
You didn't say although.
No, there was no although.
Ways, which we call although. Oh boy.
Well, we've got a running game going on here on Discuss with Russ today.
I mean, it's fun.
Yeah. So I get it, right? Like that's always been a concern, right? Is how does the SALT deduction really affect the market, right? And how did it affect prices? I mean, you mentioned that it's been there for a couple of years, Shaun. What was it a couple of years ago? How did that really affect? I mean, was that part of the reason we saw prices decline in 2018-19 was because of that? I mean, I had anticipated it would have a 5 or 6% effect. I don't know what it actually was. What did your research and knowledge show you?
I mean, to me, it was definitely a contributing factor. It wasn't, primary, but I think it was a contributing factor. The market in the city was just so overscorched at a certain point. I would say it needed a reset. So, I think that's what was, one of the reasons. But, we did see a few people move to different areas. Some people move out of those, higher taxed areas as well to, find a place that they could have a bit of a haven. We saw more people shifting their primary residences to Florida, keeping the New York residents 182 days out of the year, things like that. But I'm not really a CPA, so I didn't get too involved on that front. But there's certainly talks about it, and it was a hot button for quite a few people. That's for sure.
Warren, did what have you seen in terms of how people are treating that and how prices may have reacted, especially at the high end, because that's who most would be affected by that, right?
I agree with Shaun. I think it was a contributing factor, but I suspect that the decline in prices started even before the new tax laws went into effect. But even though it's a contributing factor, it's certainly not something that is preventing people from buying. People, are griping about it, but they're still buying. I see people that are selling their $2 million houses, $1.5 million houses in Woodbury and Old Brookville, and then they're buying into some of these newer retirement communities that are going up on Long Island, where it's like a lateral move. They're selling for $1.5 million, they're buying $1.5 million, and frankly, even the taxes are going up. But they want the lifestyle, and they'll complain about the fact that they can't deduct, but they're still paying it.
Very good. So any final words, any final thoughts on anything we may not have covered in terms of what the market's going to look like over the next few months or next couple of years as a result of this? Shaun?
Yeah, so although we've gone through a pandemic, I do feel that things will pick back up to where they were the first 10 weeks of the year. We got off to one of the best starts we had in the last 3 years. And, we were primed for a pretty amazing season. And of course, all that came to a screeching halt. I think it could take some time. There are people out there right now looking, and I'm taking buyers out. I had a buyer go out yesterday. I have some buyers going out this weekend. I'm doing open houses this weekend. So there are going to be people out and looking, and there are going to be, deals. I think that sellers are kind of at a point where, hey, we feel this is the bottom. I don't want to give anymore. I don't want to budge anymore. So I don't think we're going to see this major price drop off. I think it's going to stay pretty flat. But I think it will take time for that demand to kind of come back. It's going to, in my opinion, and to when people feel comfortable moving about freely, it could take a couple of months. So I'm estimating that our new busy season could turn into September, October, November, before it kind of calms down again before the end of the year.
Warren?
I would agree. I think that the spring buying season, there was a lot of demand, and it came to a screeching halt. But the demand is still there. So once the green light is given, people are going to continue to come out more and more to look for houses. And this year's spring buying season may be September, October, November.
Great. Thank you both. So tell me, how can people reach you? Warren, let's start with you.
My website is www.mortgagewealthadvisors.com. All of my contact information is there. You can email me from the website. And of course, you could also call me. My office number is 516-584-7218.
Shaun?
You can always catch me on Zoom in my mobile office here. Or you can try me on my mobile number, which is 347-266-5806, or my email address, which is sanders@elliman.com, like Barry Sanders at ELLIMAN.com.
Well, certainly. Thank you both for joining us this afternoon on Discuss with Russ. Shaun Anders, Warren Goldberg again. You can reach me, Russell Rivera, at russell.rivera, russell.rivera @voicewealth.com, or you can give us a call at 646-630-0980. We will be sending a follow-up email with the link to the recording, which if you would like to check, will be found on www.voicewealth.com/blog. It'll be available middle of next week, or you can view all of our videos and episodes of Discuss with Russ on the Voice Wealth Management YouTube channel. Next week, I will be taking the week off. We will be back on Wednesday, July 8th at 2 p.m. with a new episode. That is yet to be determined, so please check your email inboxes for that. We'd like to thank all of you for watching and for joining us this afternoon. And until July 8th, see you then.
Take care.
See you later.
Drive safe, Russ, Shaun.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.